Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is the Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel, welcome back to Total War Warhammer. So this is our third round, we're up against Muukip in this one. We're playing a pretty bad matchup here, we're playing as Chaos against Orcs, which I would argue is pretty bad, mostly because Warriors of Chaos obviously are one of the worst factions. Yeah, we're trying this out here. What I wanted to sort of try here was just a fairly larger number of Marauders than I would normally ever take. I was thinking that maybe you could use them to bulk up your numbers and maybe get around the flanks, but that's not really going to work out very well here, and you're pretty easily going to see why. But my orc opponent here is going to be doing the war boss, the shaman, 4 of the goblins, 6 of these orc warriors, 3 of the goblin archers, 2 of the orc boar boy. I think those are the orc boar boy biggins, 2 trolls, and a giant. So it's got the very full roster, and this is why I can't envelop around the sides of his army, obviously. What we've got here is 5 units of Marauders, which is way more than I would normally take against Orcs, or anything really. I usually like just taking about 2, or 3 at most. We've got a whole bunch of Forsaken here, 5 Forsaken. I would have definitely liked to have more of them. We've got 3 Chaos Warriors with Halberds. Would have also liked to have had more of them. And we've got 3 Chaos Warhounds. We're led by the Chaos General and a Fire Wizard yet again, which is, I think, the sort of to-do thing when you're playing as Chaos. Just because Death Magic is good right now with its morale debuffs, but it's not enough to win your fights in a lot of cases. So this particular match, it is a bad matchup in a lot of senses. The Forsaken, while they're good, aren't quite good enough, and they certainly are easily countered by things like Trolls, Giants, stuff like that. And it's pretty safe to take those options against Chaos. They don't have a lot of options that work against them. We do have slight counters against that with flaming weapons, but the Giant, there's really nothing in my roster that works well against it, so we're going to have a bit of a trouble with that. So my opponent does have that sort of very large battle line here that's going to work out quite well for him. I do think he's got the slightly advantaged side. This map is pretty asymmetrical, and you can hide the whole army on this side, but you can't on this one. That's not really a huge deal. You can see the width of my army, and it's quite large, but that doesn't really necessarily matter here because he's able to spread out to cover that pretty effectively. Goblins as well, I've done this in testing, they're not really beaten by Marauders, which is depressing because the Marauders do cost that 100 points more, and I've complained about the Marauders in the past, and I've actually praised the Goblins before in the past as well. They're a solid unit, I actually do like them. I don't personally take them very often, but I do think that they're very effective for what they do. They just win against a lot of other 300-point units, and even Marauders, they tend to grind them down, and to the point where they don't necessarily win against them necessarily, but it's pretty damn close. So at this point in time, we're sort of charging forward. The Marauders can charge in sort of weird ways and still do successfully. The Orcs are charging in counter. And you can see that we're causing pretty huge damage from this. The Orcs are putting some buffs down though, sneaky stabbing. It's a pretty okay buff, it does pretty well, but what's more important is he's coming in now with the Trolls, and of course with his Giant, which is going to suck quite a bit. We're countering, of course, with our Flaming Cloak and Flaming Sword Ruin, actually. We probably should have put it over here, but I think that we're nicking these units with that. Might not be, actually, it looks like we're not, but it doesn't really matter too much. So yeah, the Chaos Marauders are just up against these goblins on these flanks here, and I think I definitely agree with my former assessment of them. There's just really no reason to take these guys. We are going to get a pretty good engage here though with these goblins and our general against the opponent general. These Chaos Warriors with halberds, sorry. They're a pretty good hit here. We're also going to get around behind these Orc Boarboy Biggins a little bit with these Chaos Warhounds, but they're no match for Orc Boarboy Biggins. Orc Boarboy Biggins are a much more elite unit. These 2 Chaos Marauders as well are not going to do too well. Now, this is a pretty good match for my opponent. He chases off another unit of Warhounds over here, and these Marauders just aren't going to be able to hold off against this. There's 3 units of them, but it's not enough to hold off against the Trolls, the Goblins, the other Goblins. I would have been much better off with just 1 unit of Forsaken over there, I think. I definitely do. Over here, though, in the center, he's losing a lot of his units, but at the same time, these are not that important, because he still has his Giant, and his Giant is still absolutely wrecking my units here. These Orc boys here are holding up pretty well against these Chaos Warriors with halberds. Got Flaming Sword of Ruin down here again, because I need to win against these infantry so I can start fighting this Giant. We're coming in with a couple of these Forsaken here. And we were cleared up here a bit, but my general's sort of chasing after this Orc War Boss. I didn't think that he was supposed to be that fast, but he is quite fast. I didn't realize he was as fast as a Chaos Warlord. We do get into the Night Goblin Shaman, and this is going to stop that buff torrent coming up from him. And we're going to be able to maintain ours, so that works out pretty well. But we still have no answer to this giant, and that's going to be the crux of the problem in this situation. It works as well when you're playing against Chaos as beastmen to take the giant to a certain extent, but at the same time, the beastmen don't necessarily have the same armor-piercing units or the same ability to get that. He didn't take armor-piercing units, really. He had the trolls. You could have taken Minotaurs if you were playing Beastmen, but what he had instead was Sneaky Stabbing, which works really well here because I've got lots of heavily armored units. It turns his modestly armor-piercing units into ones that have good armor-piercing, so it was a good call. It's a very good pick in the fight versus Chaos. I think that definitely played a major part in this particular battle. I got my Chaos Lord fighting against some of these trolls here. This time I think he did have Flaming Sword for a brief period there. We're probably going to Cascading Firecloak again pretty soon, but we're bringing in these Marauders again, but a lot of his units also rallied. The problem with this is just that I can't really deal with these trolls. He's got Wa coming down. It's going to make his units much, much stronger than my own. The buffs for Orcs are really, really good. It's what lets them sort of plow through Forsaken with units that are technically inferior, like Orcs or Goblins. But, I mean, it's not like it's a huge overrun sort of situation. What's a huge overrun sort of situation is that Giant. Very, very good pick against Chaos. Very well played as well. He kept it supported. He balled enough units in amongst it that my units couldn't really just focus it down with the halberds that I did put into it, and I did make sure to put halberds into the Chaos Giant, or the Orcish Giant. Now, I could counter with my Giant of my own, but of course they have Goblin Archers, and I don't have access to really any Archers. I could have taken Marauder Horsemen, but they just wouldn't have done anything in particular. I think I got hit by a debuff there, Itchy Nuisance. Itchy Nuisance doesn't matter as much. My melee attack isn't really as important. What's really was working well for him was the Sneaky Stabbing, which I think is the much stronger spell in this particular case. That Flaming Sword of Ruin down again just to deal a little bit of extra damage, but it's pretty much over. So, yeah, it was a good army composition from my opponent there. Very well played as well. This is in particular one, I think that Chaos Marauders, like, just don't get the job done against Orcs and Goblins. I'm not really sure what faction they do get anything done with. I kind of want them to be good, so I take them sometimes. I'm trying to figure out a good composition for them to really showcase or excel in, but they just don't ever seem to pass muster. I think that's the case with a lot of Chaos's units, but you know, like Chaos Warriors with halberds, they just don't tend to beat units that you would expect them to. In this case, they weren't able to get into them properly either, but like trolls they'll beat, for example. Like the fact that they're not winning against these trolls right now, that's not really representative. But you know, they don't really beat giants in practice. It's very, very difficult for them to do so. We're just piling in what is left of our troops, but there's so few left that we're not going to be able to win this one. Our troops do keep rallying though for some reason. I was thinking at this point that was pretty much all over, but yeah, for some reason our troops all keep rallying and coming back and then losing again. And we actually have a pretty decent representation. It's dropping really fast now, but for some reason we had a decent chance on the balanced power bar, which really goes to show just how janky that thing is. I think he's using Wa again here. Yeah, that's a very short cooldown ability. It's a very powerful one. It's one of the things that makes Orcs really good, because it is one of the best general abilities in the game. I think that it's one of the reasons that Orcs are currently one of the strongest factions, because it transforms this unit from, for example, let's take this Orc unit over here. It goes from 26 to like 82, I think, 84 melee attack, which is a huge number. It makes them really, really effective. It means that their weapon strength, which is really high, gets to really be showcased and highlighted. But yeah, this was a really good game by my opponent there. It was just a bad call by me to try to take those Marauders. I just really don't know when they're useful, although I'll show you a game where they are in just a second here. Alright, so in this game, I'm taking Gorby's Chariots, because I really want to try and find a composition where these things work. But we've got them, we've got the 2 Minotaurs, we've got 5 Ungor Spearmen, we got some veterancy on them because we had a few spare points, we've got a Cygor, we've got the 2 Gorbals, and we've got the Malagor. Now the reason I'm taking this composition is because in a lot of senses, Warriors of Chaos really are kind of like Dwarves. But my opponent has taken a whole bunch of these marauders, which isn't really a great target for me to throw into these Razor Gore chariots. Now, this is not an army I would ever have recommended to anybody, but I wanted to give it a try just to figure out if it could work against something, because they're considered a core choice in this tournament. But I don't think that they do. Now, if I was taking a standard army, this would have been a lot harder for my opponent, because marauders get completely creamed by gores. Like, if I had taken a gore unit, they can probably chew through like a unit and a half easily of Chaos Marauders, and possibly one unit of gores can take out 2 units of Chaos Marauders. It's one-sided as hell. Now, he has got things like trolls to help in that fight there, but they don't match up against things like the Minotaurs. He's got a couple of units of Chaos Warriors, and those do well against gores, but they don't do well against beastmen necessarily, because what ends up happening, they get sort of plastered by the Minotaurs and stuff like that. They get hit pretty hard by the Gorbals, and they don't tend to do that well as a result of that, but they're pretty okay against gores and stuff like that, so that's why you would take them. You just have to make sure that they're fighting the right things, and expect them to get hit by the more mobile gores and Minotaurs, because those are more mobile units. Now, I'm going to start eventually moving towards this hill here with my chariots. The problem is that they've got fairly fast units here in addition. They've got a unit of Chaos Knights somewhere. Can't remember where it is. It's over here. I probably should be throwing rocks at it, but I kind of want to get rid of some of these Chaos Warriors. But what we're going to do is just charge in with these Razor Gore chariots and see how much damage we can do. I just kind of wanted to try this out here. And I wanted to find a good armored unit to hit with this, so I came across over this side, which is where his cavalry isn't, because the cavalry is the most dangerous part of this. These Chaos Trolls are coming up to sort of countercharge this, which is a good call from him. The Chaos Marauders, like, it plows into them and it deals some damage to them. It actually deals a pretty okay amount, but it's not really worth it, because these Chaos Marauders just aren't worth that much. Now, I'm not particularly good at the click drag through because I don't do it, so my units kind of get stuck here. And this one in particular, I did set them to guard mode, so they're not supposed to turn back like this, but we send another unit, another charge order onto these Forsaken here, onto the flank. Does pretty okay for us. We got these Minotaurs. I probably should have charged them when they were sort of more downhillward, but that's relatively okay. We are just charging them into these Marauders, and this is a good chance for Marauders to really sort of highlight themselves, because they will beat these Minotaur units to a certain extent. Like, there's just too many units here for the Minotaurs to actually beat, but they'll do a lot of damage on the way down. They'll go down swinging. They've already got a few kills. What's really weird is that I've actually taken a lot of damage on the initial from this, which does seem wrong, but maybe that's just because of the buffs that are being used. He is using both Cascading Firecloak and Flaming Sword of Ruin to try and win that fight quickly. We're bringing up some Ungor Spearmen. Now, these chariots do manage to take out this unit of Chaos Marauders. Like, they can do it, and they've done huge damage to this Forsaken unit as well. But the thing to remember is this is a 1,100 point unit, and it requires a lot of my micro attention, which I don't think is really necessarily worth it. Gets charged here by these Trolls again. Trolls are quite fast, which I think is a good thing for them. The speed on these chariots, though, quite a bit faster, so if I'm paying more attention or getting successful pull-throughs, I could probably have escaped that a little bit more effectively. Get a rear charge in against these Chaos Marauders over here that are fighting my Gorbals, and a few other units here, and these guys are going to go down pretty quickly. These Chaos Marauders are getting another Cascading Firecloak. This Razor Gore Chariot's coming in as well, but we're chucking rocks into the midst of this army here. We're getting a lot of kills on some of these units here. Like this Cygor here is up to 39, this one's up to 12, it's just coming in later. But as well, these Razor Gore Chariots, they're getting decent numbers of kills. The problem is that we're up against Chaos Marauders, so this is when those things are pretty useful. We are breaking as well a couple of these units here, which I think is quite nice, but the problem is that you sacrifice so much on the rest of your army that you end up in a situation where you can't really do a whole lot elsewhere. So maybe this works well against Dwarves and not against Chaos, but even then, I think that Dwarves would have enough firepower that as I came in there to try and do the same thing here, what would happen is he would hit me with enough firepower that my Chaos Chariots would probably get completely destroyed. So we are chucking rocks and boulders and stuff like that at these Chaos Knights, which are right now, I feel, the biggest threat to me. But it doesn't really tremendously matter what I'm throwing these at. We're missing a lot of these rocks because of the hill just being at a bad angle for us. But we charged the Cygor, one of them, into these Chaos Knights here. And at this point in time, like, my units are just sort of stuck. Like, he's able to pull through my Cygor without much coincidence, much consequence in a sense. and gets back to my chariots. Malagor starts charging in just because he can, and we charge in with our other Cygor, but it's pretty much over at this point in time. I just can't make these Razorgore chariots work. I don't know. I don't think that they're a very good unit is the problem. There's probably some quick drag pull through stuff that causes them to cause way more casualties on the impact, but I just don't think that they can pull it off for their cost value, and that's ultimately the problem with these things. It's not necessarily that they perform badly, because like this one over here did get 89 kills. It's 89 kills against things like Marauders. If I was against tougher units, obviously I would have had less kills. This one has 84 kills. Again, most of them were Marauders. That's not really worth it for a 1,100 point unit. My Cygor here is smashing things out here, and he's getting a little bit too surrounded. He's taking damage a lot faster than I've really ever seen a Cygor take damage from these sorts of units, but I think it must have been the Chaos General to a certain extent. Over here, this one's lasting a lot longer, and he's up against pretty much the same composition sans the General, so that really must have been mostly just the General there. Gorbals here holding out as best as they can, but yeah, this was kind of, in a sense, lucky in the army draw for my opponent, because I did take this army that was designed to crack through more elite Chaos Warriors in a certain sense, and he had a swarm of Marauders, which, you know, this normally would not win against Beastmen, because the Gores are so much more economical and so much better, but he sort of saw through me or something like that, or maybe he just got lucky on what he decided to go for, but either way, he really hard counterpicked what I was taking there, and that was a really good call on his part. Maybe he took the Marauders because he knew he didn't have to deal with armor on my part, which is a valid thing to think. Like, Beastmen don't have armored units, so if I had Bestigors, maybe that would be a problem, but I obviously am not going to take them because they're a really bad unit. They lose against much cheaper units of infantry in this game, so they're really, really rotten, and I would only be allowed to take 2 of them anyway. So, yeah, got outplayed there, outpicked, but we were experimenting in this one, so not probably going to take Razorgore Chariots again. I just cannot make them work for the life of me. But anyway, let's go on to match 3. Alright, so in this one I sort of want to try out the organ gun to a certain degree. Now, I get really angry at my opponent in this one because there's a couple specific rules to this particular match, and in my opinion he breaks 2 of them. So I'm not actually going to really whine about it too much, in the sense like I'm not going to officially ask, oh, well, he should be penalized or something like that, because I don't think he should be. But, you know, I was just telling him don't do it again. But we're playing as the Dwarves in this one. We've got a Dwarf Lord, we've got 3 Dwarf Thanes, we've got 3 units of Dwarf Warriors, 4 units of Dwarf Warriors with great weapons, we've got 5 of the Longbeards, 3 Quarrelers, and the Organ Gun, which I wanted to see if it was a valid choice in this sort of setting. He's got the Strigoi Lord, he's got 7 units of regular Skeletons and 4 units of Cryptors, mostly just to fulfill his obligatory core requirement. He's got Black Knights, Blood Knights, 3 units of Strigoi, and the Mortis Engine. So probably, I think you're allowed to do that. I can't remember which are rare and which are special, but I'm assuming it must be the Mortis Engine and the Blood Knights are rare, and the Cryptors and the Black Knights are special. I think that must be it. But the rules in this one are that my opponent's not allowed to hang back, and since he's not moving, I'm forced to move forward here, but technically speaking, I should be allowed to stick to a strong defensive position. And when he does start moving, he actually doesn't move towards me. What he does is actually he moves sort of to the side and back, which forces me to move forward again. Now, I could have complained at this point in time, and this is where I probably should have done it, and said, you know, I'm not going to move towards you, I'm going to move to a strong defensive position, you have to move towards me. The reason that works that way is because I have artillery and he does not. The faction that has artillery is allowed to hang back simply because it's so slow to move it. And the fact that if he's going for an all-infantry rush, then he's going to have to figure out how to use that. That's the sort of rule of the tournament. The other thing is that he's not allowed to kite backwards fighting for a draw, which, in my opinion, he does later. He argues that it's not to do that, but I disagree. Either way, I'm, you know, just a little bit angry about this particular match. Like, you can see that every time I inch forward with my organ guns, he inches his army back, and issues an order to move him further back. So, like, that's not something you're allowed to do in this particular tournament when you're the melee faction. I should not have to roam across the goddamn map to do that. And you can see that this match is going to take a very, very long time. So we're actually going to hit fast forward here. Now he is moving his cavalry around the flank here, and there's not a whole lot that you can do about that as dwarves necessarily. I don't have enough to frontline and to cover my backline in the end, so that's going to work out very well for him. That's quite good. But still, like, you can see that I have to inch my army forward, and every time I do, like, I'm not gaining any distance with my organ guns here. I'm not getting any closer to my targets. And it's been about 4 minutes of my opponent trying to move further away from me, or not moving towards me. And that's, like, we're pretty close to the 4-minute mark here. That's a fifth of the match where he, as the faction that has to move towards me, is moving away from me. So I probably should have just stood by this hill and waited until he did it, because he's not allowed to do that. But either way, he's now finally moving a little bit forward. So yeah, what prevents people from just camping then, if that's sort of the rule? Well, if your opponent also takes artillery, they can just do that as well. Then you have to do an artillery duel, which is fine. I don't mind those. They're kind of annoying to get into, but I think that they work out okay. Either way, we're firing at skeletons because that's really what there is to hit here, unfortunately. Probably need to remember that people aren't going to say Graveguard with the current rules and setup. I could be firing at the Crypt Horrors, but this thing doesn't really do a ton of damage to those sorts of things. So, it's not really necessarily that great. Dealing a lot of damage to these skeletons, though, it does shred them apart quite quickly, so if it weren't for the fact that they're like 300-something points, it would probably be an okay investment, but he's going to get here and I'm going to have taken out 300-something points worth of stuff. Like, that's really not worth it. I do switch targets, though, to the Mortis Engine. Unfortunately, it turns out that the organ gun doesn't really deal damage to the Mortis Engine. Not something I really knew about this matchup, so that's good to know. I think you need to use a normal cannon, but even then, I don't think it works very well against the Mortis Engine. Getting a lot of crossbow fire here as well. Does okay against the skeletons, really, but again, we're not too concerned about the skeletons. We're going to switch our targets pretty soon here. He runs up and uses an invocation of Nihek on these skeletons, which I think is a little bit of a waste. He doesn't really need to, because they're going to be just fine in this fight regardless. But he is going to try to go for a strategy where his Mortis Engine just sits there and basically tanks a lot of, apparently, my shots without taking any damage. But yeah, that should make sense to me, though. I should have realized that, because organ guns just don't have the statistics or the numbers for that. We're piling in a lot of shots from our quarrelers, but we're unfortunately forced to abandon our backline defenders because, like, realistically, we're going to lose our front line here. Our Dwarf Warriors are not capable of standing up against these Crypt Horrors in addition to all this other stuff that's charging into them. And this does leave us open in the back for charges from these Blood Knights. Now, it doesn't matter too much that we get charged in the back here, because realistically we weren't going to be able to defend our back line against them anyway, with just a few units of Dwarf Warriors here. Actually, our front line is longer, so I might have been able to hold out a little longer, but you can see that we do still need our crossbows. Like, we've taken out one unit of Crypt Horrors. He's going to summon another one, I think, or did he already do that? So, yeah, he'll be able to do that pretty effectively, I think. But, yeah, we start moving our crossbows to fire at another unit. These guys come around the rear. Unfortunately, I have to move this unit in, just because these units are sort of faltering. I didn't realize I had this other unit of Dwarf Warriors with great weapons in here, which means I probably could have held out without doing that and could have had this in the back here, but that was a mistake on my part, trying to manage a little bit too much. The Crypt Horrors managed to bust through my lines pretty badly as well, and these were units that I needed to focus on quite effectively. But yeah, the Crypt Horrors just wrecking my Dwarf Warriors with great weapons. Now, this ball does get charged, this one fighting their general, but that doesn't really actually do too much damage, you'll notice. We do get hit as well on these unit of Quarrelers. We start running a unit back to deal with that, but that thins out our front line a little bit. Our general is trying to fight this Mortis Engine, but it's also extremely durable against my general. Now, there is actually some physical resistance on this thing, which is why it's not taking that much damage, and it has got 6,000 hit points, basically. So, yeah, I guess generals don't really have a good attack against this. I probably would have to... Oh, this is also Invocation of Nihegen. But I'd probably have to use Thorgrim Grudgebearer against this thing, I think. Not really 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure these guys have a little bit of physical resistance. He's also slowly draining the health from my Lord, so that's ungood. Over here, doing cycle charges with the Blood Knights, which is what you just sort of need to be doing. Unfortunately, my crossbowmen are getting a little bit swamped here, but we have finally got a unit into these Blood Knights. They are taking quite a lot of damage from this fight, but they'll be fine. We are able to turn around here and get some damage against these Crypt Horrors over here, and they're down pretty badly. And we're also getting some damage on his general, the Streetwise Ghoul King. It's got natural regeneration, so he doesn't really even have to use anything to keep it up. But our Thanes are doing a good job here holding up these Crypt Ghouls, which I'm surprised are not crumbling faster. But, you know, sometimes those units just hang around. They are within range of the Mortis engine, so they're probably being kept up by that to a certain extent as well. But those Skeleton Warriors hanging in there just barely. These Crypt Horrors, like, I'm amazed that these guys have not crumbled, because they're in negative morale, I think. Well, now they've crumbled, okay. But, yeah, this Mortis engine, I'm not really sure what the easier way to deal with it. Probably crossbows, is my guess. It's not necessarily that heavily armored, and they've got really good damage per second. It's got 60 damage, that's pretty good. Over here, thanks to the Blood Knight cycle charging, we have disintegrated over there, and we still got this one unit of Crypt Horrors that we have to get rid of. And we don't have easy answers for that sort of thing. We're seeing this charging into the rear of these Dwarf Warriors with great weapons that are fighting the Streetwise Ghoul King, and the Black Knights are over here. We've got Invocation of Mihek coming in and dealing some damage there. Now, I probably could have tried to take something other than the Thanes, but actually the Thanes end up being really worthwhile, and I'm not sure if it would have been better to take stripped down Rune Priests against Undead. It might have been, but this is what we ended up having, so our general's getting kind of swarmed by a bunch of other stuff here. We're going to want to reinforce him as soon as we can, but we have to get through these Crypt Ghouls before we can send that, and these units are just, you know, holding out. They're like this one, it's got 8 members and it's just crumbling. It's even got minus 35 morale. So, at this point in time, though, we have taken out the rest of the Crypt Ghouls. We have done a pretty good job around the map here. These crossbowmen get charged by these Blood Knights. They're pretty much full health because they've been getting invocations. Actually, no, there's still Crypt Horrors here. Firing crossbow bolts at them pretty okay. This organ gun gets manned again, but unfortunately I don't think we're going to keep it for very long. I should have targeted it right away against those Blood Knights, but I didn't, so that was another mistake by me. But at this point in time, we've crumbled lots and lots of the undead army here. We don't really have much of an army left ourselves, though, so it's going to come down to just a small number of factors. One thing that's going to be irritating is that I cannot kill this Mortis engine. I don't know, it's just really hung together. I guess he has been invocationing it, which really does help, and it's got natural regeneration as well, so it's not going to die exactly that easily. We do get this thing turned around, but I don't think it gets to fire. I think it's technically blocked, so it doesn't manage to get a shot against these Blood Knights. So the Blood Knights do charge in, start wrecking our stuff again, along with the General, so Streetwise Ghoul King. Over here, Thanes walloping through skeletons, these Crypt Ghouls as well, getting walloped by a Thane. We are getting some good damage finally on this Mortis engine. I'm not really 100% sure what's doing it, but something here is doing a better job than was previous, because it's taking damage pretty fast now. And my guess is it's out of regeneration, so the incremental small damage that I'm doing is no longer getting healed. I think that's the big difference here. So, you know, it happens, I guess. He is starting to run it away, which is going to be a little bit irritating. We don't really have anything that can catch it at this point in time. But at this point in time, my opponent sort of like runs away with all of his units. He says that's to capture these units that are retreating, but none of these actually can rally. They're on 2 negative morale, and they're never going to recover. This unit of Dwarf Warriors with great weapons should be coming back into the fight, though, so we could have gone after them, I guess. But what's going to happen here is that this fight's going to start turning against him, and instead of trying to fight it, he just ends up running away for a variety of reasons. Now, he can win this if he just hangs it out here. This is close enough that he definitely could have won it, and you'll see later that he, it's pretty obvious as to why he could have won it, because he does win it. But he ends up running away his general and his Blood Knights, because the remaining troops here, I don't know why he does necessarily. His argument is that he wants to clean up these side supporting troops. I don't think that that's true, because he wouldn't have done this in any other match. He would have tried to break through the remaining units that I had. But yeah, we're chasing after these Blood Knights here. There's not much I can do as dwarves to chase after these guys, so at this point in time, his general has disengaged and is chasing after like units that will never recover anyway. He's trying to chase these Blood Knights after a legitimate unit, and this is fair, like, this is fine, but we're trying to chase after these Blood Knights, and they're still running. Like, they caught this unit, they've destroyed it, that, you know, now they're no longer running towards it. Now they're just outright running away from my units. His general's coming back, so clearly, like, he isn't actually interested in shattering these units. This unit's still basically out. It'll retreat as soon as the balanced power bar moves, but Like, he wasn't actually trying to shatter these units, is what I'm saying. Because here he turns around and charges one of my units. It is braced, so it does take a little bit less damage. But yeah, at this point in time, he gets a good cycle charge in, and that's fine. Like, you can cycle charge. It's just that it was one of those clear, like, running away sort of things. And, you know, it wouldn't have bothered me if he just stuck it out and won, which he would have, I think. Maybe he wouldn't have, but he ends up doing this sort of thing here. My general breaks here. Like, my general has been on very low health for a long time because of the Mortis engine. Does manage to kill my general as well, which is quite bad for me, but these things are going to be able to hold out for a little while longer. They are able to deal good damage to the Blood Knights, but they're not really able to catch or kill this Mortis engine, which is on such low health that if they got one swing at it, it might crumble, but you never know. So he's using move through commands to sort of try and knock over my units with unit mass and a momentum, which is pretty good. And for some reason these guys stop engaging in combat, which, you know, it happens from time to time in this game. But I charge them back into the general, and this is where I really think that my opponent definitely has no interest in trying to, like, actually, because he runs away all his units now. Like, I don't think that this was a legitimate move at this point in time. He could have still won if he stuck it out there, but yeah, so instead he goes wandering off against units that aren't going to rally. That one's shattered. And even then, he's still moving away from me. At this point in time, then he turns around and I think he tries to go after these guys or something. I don't really remember. Yeah, he does. Which, you know, okay, fair enough. This one rallied, I guess, but it's going to not really have an impact on this. So, yeah, I mean, at this point in time, since I can't catch any of his units, you know, if I come running towards him, then sure, you know, he can run away in a normal game, but he's not allowed to do that here. Now, he could have just stood through that. He really could have. So those units shatter, because like I told you, they don't actually have enough units there. And there he doesn't even, like, fly directly towards them. The reason that he did that little thing is because I was calling him out on it. Yeah, so he charges in. My guys get flattened, and this guy gets killed because he's on the lower health. This guy's not fighting for some reason, which is fine. That happens quite often, but you're going to notice that, like, it's pretty close. Like, it is pretty close. So I think that that's sort of a fair thing to think that you might lose if you're stuck in there, but I think my opponent would have won just because Struggle King really, really good against dwarves. Like, he is definitely capable of defeating dwarves. We do manage to kill the Mortis engine here, which would have helped way ages ago. But our remaining Thanes here, one of them fighting against these Blood Knights is going to be able to defeat those Blood Knights. But these two fighting the Strigoi Ghoul King, he's using Arcane Conduit. That's going to heal him a little bit. I think he's capped on healing at this point in time, but he again sort of, like, starts running his units away. And this kind of running away is fine. He's going to re-engage. He's doing it to knock down my units, and that's perfectly fair. But yeah, like, I think he still would have won even if he hadn't done that. Maybe not if I had been camped in a proper position, but yeah, like this game has a couple of rules that I feel like he broke. It's a casual tournament though, so I mean, like, there's no point in trying to, like, complain about that too much, but it was really irritating. It was really frustrating to play against. And it's also the sort of bad sportsmanship that you play on ladder that happens quite often, that you just feel is not entertaining. I think there's going to be a graphical glitch here that might lead me to a win. That's a corrupted recording. I didn't win this game. Maybe it's not going to do that, actually. But it kind of looks like it almost might, which would be interesting. Yeah, no, there we go. This thing breaks at plus 39. I think he's terrified. Yeah, that's from Terror, so that's fair enough. Yeah, he rallies temporarily here somehow. I don't really get how Terror works sometimes, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that we're going to lose this one, as we should. These Blood Knights down to critical binding. This Thane is going to start running back into the fight again, but it's a real grind-out slog between these types of units. I probably should have charged into the Blood Knights here, actually, with him. This Thane here is routing. He's actually routing. It's not Terror this time, so he's not going to rally, probably. I don't think, anyway. But we've got this one Thane left here, and he's not going to be able to take out the General. He just doesn't have the armor-piercing damage. The Strigoi Ghoul King does have very good armor and armor-piercing damage as well. So you can see that he's winning this decisively, it says. And we are going to lose this. So this match pissed me off quite badly. But in the end, I think he still would have won regardless, but it matters how you win. You know, if you're going to win by doing things that are strictly against the rules, even if it's like, well, no, I was doing it because of X, Y, or Z, it's very, very frustrating for the person who has to play against that. But in any event, you know, things like that happen from time to time. This was just the most egregious. Like, there were other ones in the previous tournaments where I kept calling people out for corner camping in particular, and stuff like that. You know, people do that, and, you know, you go on with things. But in any event, let's go on to the final match. Alright, so in this one I'm playing as the Bretonnians. We're up against the Empire. I've got the Bretonnian General, I've got 2 Paladins, I've got 6 Spearmen at Arms, I've got 4 Polemen at Arms, Polearms, we've got 4 Bretonnian Archers, we've got a Knight of the Realm, and 2 Grail Knights. Our opponent has taken the Empire General, he's taken the Amethyst Wizard, he's taken 3 of the Spearmen, 5 of the Swordsmen, 2 Crossbowmen, 2 Gunners, 2 Demigryph Knights with Halberds, and a Hellstorm Rocket with some veterancy. So that's a very, very strange choice. A little bit unique, a little bit interesting to see there. Now, this is one of the ones that comes down pretty much to the wire. So you'll notice that my opponent's got himself sort of in a nice defensive position, in a very, very strong spot to defend from. This is what I should have done. I should have just sat there and either called him out on his waiting, or I should have just sat there until 20 minutes was up, in which case I think he would have automatically lost. But yeah, like, this is what is a good position, and this is one of the big advantages of taking artillery, because if you're firing from here, you know, your opponent has to come to you. That's basically how that works. Now, my units are getting absolutely pummeled by the Hellstorm Rocket Battery because it's got so much veterancy. The rate of fire is up, the accuracy is a little bit up. But what's not necessarily up is the ammunition, and what is also up is the cost. This thing costs more than, like, all of my Spearmen put together. It would have to kill every single unit of Spearmen to make its money back. So I'm not necessarily sure that I find it a worthwhile investment, but it definitely does rack up kills against something like the Bretonnians. I just think that would be better against someone like maybe, say, Orcs and Goblins, because they have more expensive infantry that they rely on more heavily. So our 4 archers are going to come up and they're going to try and focus down some of these crossbowmen at first, but they're going to be quite important to my strategy in some senses. The spearmen in this particular case, since once I get into range, I've got a missile advantage compared to my opponent, and you're going to see that quite quickly. I actually fire off a volley by accident with the swordsman, but we pretty quickly switch targets over to the crossbowmen. Because my opponent is at a missile disadvantage despite the Hellstorm Rocket Battery, even though that completely wrecked my unit of Peasant Longwomen, he's going to advance towards me at this point in time. He didn't really have to. He could have tried to duke it out with skirmishers, and he might have actually won it in the grand scheme of things. But this unit of crossbowmen gets focused down by my bowman and ends up breaking, if I recall correctly. And my spearmen are going to basically have to form a good line here, hold the line to some extent or another. Now, I've got 2 paladins here, and they're going to be pretty crucial to this. The reason that I've got an air-based general in this particular one is because I know that the Empire is capable of taking, like, lots of missile units, but they're also capable of taking some flyers. If you take certain types of them, then it's really beneficial for me to have some flyers of my own. So I've got my archers trying to run past my lines here. My general's taking some hits from bullets. I need to move him back pretty soon, but he slams into the fronts of my polearms, which I had moved up to the front there, and my general is going to just run into the side of this unit of swordsmen that's engaged against these 2 paladins. These guys are getting shredded in a pretty terrible way. So while I'm getting hit by these Demigryph Knights with halberds, I still manage to get into these handgunners, and like my Knights of the Realm are a lot cheaper than these Demigryph Knights with halberds. I'm going to lose them in the process, but it's stopping him from firing. It's giving me an opportunity to run my Grail Knights into these handgunners here. I sort of hit them and then run away. I hit them here again, and this envelops both a unit of handgunners and a unit of crossbowmen. I'm going to get countercharged by another unit of Demigryph Knights with halberds, but that's fine. It's a little bit too little too late as far as that goes in terms of saving those missile units, which I think are going to be quite key for him. I'm running as well my paladins into this unit of handgunners basically, while I'm also firing some bowfire at it. We broke through here pretty easily and effectively. My general as well is in melee combat. The reason I'm making sure he's on the ground is so I can support against the Feral Manticore and the Lord here. We've popped his potion of toughness there, so he's going to be a little bit harder to kill. I've used my potion of healing, I believe. No, I've used my potion of toughness as well there. So the Feral Manticore gets chased away, and his general gets sort of surrounded here. Now, these Demigryph Knights are going to try and slip away from these paladins constantly, and they're going to do a good job of it. These Grail Knights are tough enough and durable enough that they manage to break the handgunners and basically break these crossbowmen. Might not be worth it, but I think it was pretty good all in all. We charged our paladins into this fight here as well, trying to deal damage to this general of the Empire as fast as possible. And he's taking some pretty vicious beatings in this fight. We're coming into these Demigryph Knights with halberds with our paladins as well, and their charge is going to deal some good damage against these guys as well. We're seeing some debuffs coming down, Flock of Crows, Flock of Doom on my army here. It's pretty good in this particular case, just because I got so many units there. But yeah, Demigryph Knights with halberds, they sort of retreat at this point in time. We're firing a lot of arrow fire at these missile units. I just need to clear out the last bits of missile units here. A lot of my units running from terror or from various things, but they'll be back to a certain extent, to one extent or another. Halberdiers and such are going to end up intercepting these spearmen. I'm running away with these peasant bowmen, of course. But we've still got some knights, Grail Knights. I've got my general up here fighting the Empire General. He's trying to fire up a little bit of fire, but there's not much left from that. And I've got a paladin coming in. He's also friendly firing his general quite a bit. So this isn't too bad a situation for me. But what's bad is that I think his general actually ends up breaking and actually gets away from here. Feral Manticore comes in and assists the general. So at this point in time, like, we're pretty much screwed in a few places, but we're doing really well in others. So it's hard to tell what's going on here. I actually think I'm going to lose this one at this point in time, but it's fine. What I really want to figure out was to what extent I could use a paladin strategy against the Empire, because normally you would want to have the damsel to some extent. You want to not necessarily take knights, and specifically not Grail Knights, but I wanted to take those paladins and see if I could do it. Now I did need an air general, so I couldn't take the 4 that I wanted to. I ideally wanted to have more paladins even, but I do feel like against the Empire it's just very important to have a lord in the air. And we've seen off his lord, we've seen off his Feral Manticore. I'm still ignoring the hell out of this Hellstorm Rocket Battery. I think at this point in time he's actually causing a little bit of friendly fire, but maybe not actually. He's aiming at a really far away unit. But he's got this unit of Spearmen charging into melee combat, but this unit of Spearmen and this unit of Swordsmen, they're hitting my units, but they're also getting completely shredded by bowfire while they're at it. So they're taking pretty big morale hits. Over here, he's got his Demigryph Knights desperately trying to gun down my general. My general's out of potions at this point in time, so he's going to have to try and bugger off a bit. But I'm keeping him around my paladins so that every time this happens, my general is able to use the paladins disengage and break off. At this point in time, I think he's using another Flock of Doom. He does charge his Demigryph Knights right towards my Spearmen at Arms and Shields. Now my opponent can still win this pretty handily, and it really comes down to the fact that my general, if he dies, he'll win, because my paladins, I don't think they can beat a Demigryph Knight with halberd if they keep cycle charging. I don't think they can. Maybe they can. But in any event, he's churning through my infantry like they're nothing with these Demigryph Knights with halberds. They have been nerfed, so it's not as ridiculous as it has been in the past, but here you can see that he's going after my general because my general's on the ground, but after hitting these Hellstorm Rocket Batteries, I do run him back out of combat into the air and take flight. At this point, though, it's starting to look pretty good for me. We're firing our arrows at this unit of swordsmen. This Amber Wizard actually can, I think, beat the remainder of the spear unit, but he's going after smart targets, like wherever he can. General does stomp into the swordsman, bit of a Goomba stomp there. He does again, he's again trying to pull his way into my general with these Demigryph Knights with halberds, and again I'm trying to get my general airborne before I take too much damage from them. And you can see that I managed to, for the most part, do that. He hasn't taken much damage from that. And we're going to be able to get airborne in just a second here. And now he's caught in combat a little bit with the paladins. Another Flock of Doom. I think I do move my general out of that this time. He's again taking a little bit of damage from the paladins, but he's going to go after these archers. Archers just, you know, easy victims at this point in time since I don't have anything to block, really. So, I mean, at this point in time, like, whenever he goes off to do that sort of thing, though, it gives me a good opportunity to wall up one of his units with my general, so it's a give-and-take sort of situation. And here you can see that this unit of swordsmen takes a pretty bad hit, and I start moving all my remaining units back together, consolidating them together. I think that the Amber Wizard, though, hitting the routing stage is where this sort of goes for him, because he is still getting, I think, a morale benefit from them, from the Encourage. I land my general, and I really shouldn't have here, but I do get him out of this combat pretty quickly. But at this point in time, you know, he's basically going to be tied up here. You know, he's going for my general. He's going to be tied up here by my paladins, and by these spearmen. And there's nowhere really left for him to go. He could go smash these guys. And if he does that, I'm just going to smash these spears while he's off doing that. So he's sort of stuck in here with the paladins, and he'll probably win that, I think. They're pretty weak now, actually, so maybe not. But yeah, I'm just keeping my general nearby for morale purposes, and so that also I'm getting that minus 12%. He goes in for a rear charge because he's got this rallied infantry, but I charge my general into the rear of these demigryph knights with halberds. I actually thought that I would just be able to get a quick hit there, get the charge bonus, and then get back out, but for some reason all his units shatter. And if I look there, actually that was from terror, so that was actually just luck on my part that that happened. Now I do think that I could have actually gotten back out of that safely. My halberds didn't rout, and the spearmen shattered, so what would have happened is my halberds would have held firm, and I would have been able to run past because of the charge angle of my general, and he would have been able to run past and then get to the air again without taking any damage. But his unit just shattered right away, so didn't end up happening. I actually thought my opponent was going to win that one. It was very well played by him. Bretonnia, I think right now is just not necessarily too competitive, but I think he spent so many points on things like the Hellfire rocket cannon that even though he killed 190 of my peasants with it, that's actually not that bad. Like I don't think that makes up for the fact that he spent all that on it, because 190 peasants is like 2.5 units of peasants. That's only like maybe 1,100 points if he got all halberdiers, which he didn't. He got a lot of peasant archers and he got a lot of peasant spearmen. So that he got probably more like 800 points worth or 900 points worth for something that probably cost like 1,700, and it was allowed to fire its entire ammunition off. So that didn't really work out for him, I don't think. If he had it invested in something maybe a little bit more reasonable, I think he actually would have probably pulled that through. But in any event, that was our matches. Very good games to my opponent, except for the third one, which I still think was very irritating. But yeah, no, that was a lot of fun otherwise. And of course, as always, I hope to see you all next time.